Hey everybody, we are back again for the final section of our ecology unit. Today we're talking about humans and how we impact our environment. We're mostly going to be talking about biodiversity and how humans usually lower it. So that means we'll be talking about how we decrease ecosystem diversity by reducing the number of environments, how we decrease species diversity by allowing some species to go extinct or be lost from an area, and even how we can reduce the genetic diversity of some animal species and make them all really genetically similar to each other. So, this whole slide basically summarizes all of human impact on biodiversity in the world we live in right now. So, yes, humans reduce biodiversity in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean that it's too late to fight it. Biodiversity can and should be supported by companies, governments, and people like you because it's not just good for the environment. When the environment's healthy, it's good for us too. On the left side, you can see a list of legal protections. So, those are things that our government already does to minimize biodiversity loss. So, we manage fisheries, logging, endangered species, and nature preserves. I want to be really clear about fisheries, number one, because I think this is really interesting. What would happen if we didn't regulate fisheries, if we just didn't have any rules for them? Well, it's in the interest of someone who farms fish to remove all of the natural and local predators of the area. That's absolutely a reduction in biodiversity in that area, and it's actually illegal for them to do that on that level. Also, fish farmers are not interested in keeping a diverse ecosystem. They're not interested in species diversity. They need to make a profit by farming the most profitable fish that's going to sell the best and be the healthiest. So it's up to regulations to make sure that fisheries don't take advantage and make sure that fisheries do what they can to maintain or increase biodiversity by doing things like farming multiple types of fish and leaving local predators alone. Now, let's move on to the middle of this slide. So, this is a list of things we do that are pretty much just harmful. The first one is agriculture. You're probably wondering, like, farming? Why is farming bad? Well, the land that we clear to farm, number one, it used to be an ecosystem. So now we've lost one of our ecosystems, probably the habitats of a lot of animals. Then, when we farm, it's actually a lot like fish farming, where we want to grow the most profitable crops. We're not interested in high biodiversity if we're farmers. We're interested in making the most profit and supporting our families. It's totally understandable. When we grow, for example, tomatoes, today there are only a few varieties of seeds that farmers can buy. Meanwhile, hundreds of years ago, there were so many different species. There was such high species diversity of tomatoes. A lot of those are now called heirloom varieties, and they're pretty much lost. They're not grown industrially, and they're definitely not grown in agriculture. Next on this list, we have deforestation and reforestation. So, yes, when loggers remove huge stands of trees, it can cause a reduction in biodiversity because we're losing an environment and we're splitting up the forest because now there's a section of it that animals are unlikely to pass through because it has no tree cover. It's also important to notice that when loggers reforest an area or replant trees, they're unlikely to plant more than one type. Just like the fish farmer, the loggers need to make the most profit to keep their company running. So, they're going to plant whatever the fastest growing, most profitable tree is, and they're going to plant it in a pattern that's convenient for them, not in a pattern that supports natural wildlife. And they're definitely not going to make sure they're planting all kinds of biodiverse trees, some of which they won't even be able to harvest later. In general, by expanding into new land, paving new roads, and developing buildings, we cause habitat loss, we bring invasive species into the area, we have urbanization occur, which removes local habitats entirely, and human population growth contributes to all of these factors because the more humans there are in an area, the more damage we can do. This is a really depressing picture to paint, but it's not all that bad. There are some things that you, as an individual, can do to help. Number one, if you're planting, you should plant native species to Kentucky. You shouldn't go to Lowe's and get something that might be an invasive species. For any plant that you purchase, you can always look up online if that plant is native to the area or not. It's important that we only plant native species so that our food webs and our ecosystems stay balanced. If we accidentally introduce a native species, they might not have a natural predator and they might start to grow. Their population is going to grow uncapped. So they're not going to reach a stable carrying capacity. They're going to grow too much and it's going to upset the balance of our food web and of our ecosystem. The second thing that you can do to help sounds kind of weird. It's remove barriers. Literally, ecosystems can be harmed by physical separations like fences and walls. If you don't need a fence in your yard, remove it. It can help animals flow more naturally from one environment to the next, and it helps support a healthy food web. The last one is pretty controversial. One thing you can do to increase biodiversity in the area is stop having a lawn. Look at this lawn. It is the least biodiverse thing that you could possibly imagine. It's just grass as far as the eye can see. Why do we do this? It became popular hundreds of years ago in France. What benefits do we get from it? Almost nothing. We even have to pay to mow it. You have to pay for gas for your lawnmower. Why are we doing this? What we should actually do is plant native ground covers and native wildflowers, and that doesn't just increase plant biodiversity, it's going to create habitats for things like bees and monarch butterflies and other endangered species that need support from you. Stop having a lawn, it's a waste. I wanted to highlight another enemy of biodiversity that's local to us. So this is called an emerald ash borer, and he doesn't look that bad, he's just a little beetle. But in large numbers, these species can destroy entire ash forests. They basically burrow their bodies into the tree and eat it up until that tree is totally dead inside. These species aren't natively found in North America. They were actually from Asia and they were introduced totally by accident. But now we have to do things like quarantine trees that are infected with these ash borers to try to stop them spreading and killing trees all over the country. The last example of humans and our weird impact on biodiversity is rabbits in Australia. So this species of rabbit that you see on the screen is native to Europe, and it's part of a food chain that exists there. So there are predators and parts of the environment that are limiting factors and set the rabbit population at a certain carrying capacity. The food web exists in a way that keeps the rabbit population, doable for the people of Europe. But when these rabbits were introduced in Australia, their natural predators were not around, and they didn't have the same limiting factors. So the carrying capacity of this population totally changed and got way higher than it was before. So, in other words, Australia was completely overtaken by rabbits. To try to fix it, at first they were like, okay, let's hunt all the rabbits, but they couldn't even hunt enough to lower the population in time. So instead, they came up with this kind of diabolical plan to make all of the rabbits sick with a virus that only infects rabbits, which did work for a little while. However, the survivors of that virus, the rabbit survivors, had genes that helped them survive. And then those rabbits had rabbit babies that they gave the genes to. So what I'm telling you is basically the fittest rabbits survived, reproduced, and now Australia is full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rabbits that are all immune to this virus. We didn't kill them, we only made them stronger. Thank you guys for tuning into this whole ecology unit. I will see you guys in class and in office hours. Let me know if you have questions about anything.